These two young men carrying important goods in a vehicle were unexpectedly robbed on a deserted road. Brave as Brooke was, he was also shot dead after a few shots. Finally, the robbers loaded both the goods and the driver's body onto the vehicle and drove away. But actually, the person killed was the nephew of a notorious gang leader, and that batch of goods also belonged to the boss. So, ultimately, who was audacious enough to dare steal his things? What's even stranger is that, not long after, several police officers were assassinated one after another, but all evidence at the scene pointed to the culprit being another police officer who had gone missing. What was the truth? We have to start from the beginning. On the streets of France, a chase was taking place. Police from the Special Investigation and Intervention Team were tailing a suspicious subject. He constantly changed his route, making it difficult for the police to predict, constantly turning left then right, shaking off the police, and weaving through traffic. Because the police were driving a car, they weren't as flexible as him and were left behind. They had to resort to using their advantage in numbers to split up the pursuit, but it was still ineffective. Afterwards, the criminal switched to escaping on a motorcycle right in front of the police. When they were about to lose him, Antoine immediately borrowed the motorcycle of Hannah, his teammate who had just crashed her bike, to continue the pursuit. But due to being too obvious, the subject quickly spotted the two of them, weaving and chasing each other amidst torrential rain like street boys. Because he was going too fast, the guy crashed into a car by the side of the road and was thrown onto the ground. Antoine got out, drew his gun, and approached. He remained calm, took off his hat, and asked for his name, and he replied that he was Antoine. After that, he lifted his jacket to reveal his gun and said, "Stop it. Don't try anymore. There are a lot of people here." Then, he calmly walked away, leaving Antoine bewildered. Back at the police station, everyone summed up the recent failure due to having lost track of the subject. Vinny said, now, they could only patiently wait for him to show up again. While everyone was talking, the head of the criminal division Charles walked in with a heavy expression because he had just been chewed out by his superiors. Charles said that the recent operation had not been approved by their superiors, such as the police chief and some members of the Ministry of Interior. Some witnesses from the motorcycle chase had complained to the police chief, saying the police had used excessive force in public. Although Charles had managed to settle things this time, he warned everyone that if it happened again, he wouldn't be able to help. After the meeting, Antoine, along with his girlfriend, police officer Hannah, finished work together. Hannah invited Antoine to her place, but Antoine seemed not very interested. He said that he had to go meet Marcus, because he had promised him something. Hannah seemed unhappy and thought that he would make him lose everything. But Antoine still kissed Hannah goodbye and left. Antoine then went to an underground fighting ring. His opponent was a tall guy, dressed like Bruce Lee, but his fighting skills weren't as good as the protagonists. Antoine poked him in the eye, then unleashed continuous punches. Next, he punched him hard in the collarbone, causing him sharp pain. Without stopping, he immediately used a headlock move, then hooked and threw him backwards to finish him off. Easily winning the match, he was paid by the ring owner and asked if he wanted to fight another match, but he flatly refused, even though Marcus offered to increase the fee fivefold. Antoine drove home, but unexpectedly, his path was blocked by a car mid-route. A group of armed men got out, and it turned out to be the guy he had just beaten. Angry about losing, Antoine didn't say much, grabbed a stick, and went straight to fight. By himself, he easily handled the three punks, quickly leaving them unable to get up. The next day, the police chief called Antoine in, pointed out the injuries of the other group of people, and blamed him entirely. She said that this level of attack was clearly not self-defense. Furthermore, they also discovered that Antoine had previously worked as a hired fighter for money. After a barrage of criticism in a foreign language, they proposed transferring Antoine to a clerical job at a unit far from the center, the Bob Bigney police station. Antoine had no right to refuse. As he was preparing to leave, Charles stopped him. Although very angry because he was misbehaving and participating in underground fighting, he still felt some pity. Charles told Antoine that the precinct chief Bob Bigney was an old friend of his, and he would find a way for Antoine to join the anti-crime unit. Having said that, Charles left. Afterwards, his colleagues dragged Antoine, who was feeling dejected, out for farewell drinks. Under the influence of alcohol, everyone freely vented their frustrations. Suddenly, Antoine proactively called Marcus, saying he wanted to participate in that match. So, Antoine appeared in the underground arena again, but this time he barely resisted, was quickly beaten bloody and bruised, then pinned to the ground and beaten until he lost consciousness. The next day, Hannah and their colleagues waited anxiously in the hospital. It was said that the person Antoine fought against last night was a flower dealer who was very hostile towards the police, so the match was extremely brutal. After Charles finished giving instructions, Antoine, his face full of injuries, walked out. Hannah hurriedly chased after him, asking what he planned to do, but Antoine didn't say a word. Time passed until 6 months later. Vinny, a member of the investigation and intervention team, was drinking in a bar. His mood seemed very bad, and from his words, it seemed he was very dissatisfied with the junior superior of the police team, Sammy. Vinny became increasingly dejected and suddenly thought of Antoine, who had been transferred to another station. Perhaps Antoine could solve this case. Vinny left the bar, went to the parking lot, and was then shot dead on the spot. The culprit took his phone and sped away in a vehicle. The next day, Antoine received a call from Sammy, and only then learned that Vinny had been shot and killed last night. Antoine's heart was full of shock. Then, he discovered that among the messages Vinny left behind, there was a clear recording of gunshots. Antoine immediately realized the situation was not simple and immediately drove to the Bob Bigney police station. Not long after, the receptionist announced that a woman had come to see Antoine. Going out to see, he realized it was Sophia, the wife of his old colleague Richard. She said that Richard had gone missing earlier. Richard was in the hospital for treatment for 1 month. 8 days ago, the hospital director called Sophia, reporting that Richard had escaped from the hospital and disappeared without a trace. Hearing that Vinny had been shot dead, Sophia feared her husband might also be in trouble. Although she had reported it to the police, they only recorded it without doing anything further. Therefore, she came to Antoine for help. Antoine said he would try his best. Afterwards, while on assignment, he discovered the body of another police officer in the suburbs. This person was also an old colleague of Antoine. So, Antoine hurried to the previous hospital to find Richard's doctor in charge and learned that Richard suffered from extreme paranoia. The Major Crimes Unit had previously sent people to search Richard's room, but found no clues. The doctor also said that Richard often talked with a neighbor named Garnier in the hospital. Finally, Antoine found Garnier in Vong and asked about Richard. Garnier said that Richard had mentioned he was entangled with an evil person, a member of an international criminal organization, who not only wanted to kill him, but also wanted to eliminate his entire family after a top-secret mission related to national security. The neglect from his superiors made Richard very disappointed. He often spoke nonsense, saying that his teammates had messed up the mission and they all had to pay the price. However, Garnier didn't know specifically who those people were. Seeing clearly that Antoine was determined to investigate to the end, Garnier immediately gave him a piece of paper and told him to call the phone number written on it. Because Richard had said that, if anything happened to him, he should call this number. Garnier only told this clue to Antoine alone. Finally, Antoine met Hannah again. Currently, she had transferred to the anti-flower unit. The two had not seen each other for 6 months. Hannah was naturally not happy with him, while Antoine, knowing he was at fault, didn't offer much explanation. This time he came to ask Hannah for help. Because he couldn't call that phone number, he wanted to ask Hannah to find the subscriber's owner. Antoine vaguely felt that the Major Crimes Unit was involved in the whole situation. Although angry with Antoine, because of the survival of Sergeant Richard, Hannah still agreed to help. Afterwards, Antoine went to Sophia's house, Richard's wife, and said that Richard, because he was involved in some incident, had to go into hiding. He also gave Sophia a new phone, instructing her that if there was any news, she must use that phone to contact him first, because her current phone might be being monitored. Just as Antoine was about to leave, he was stopped by people from the Major Crimes Unit. A person named Wagner proactively sought him out to talk, getting straight to the point. She told him not to continue investigating Richard anymore, but Antoine completely ignored her. Just then, he received a call from Hannah, who had found out the information about the phone number's owner, a woman with an indecent lifestyle, who used to live near Richard's house and had been arrested for using and dealing flour. Hannah also took the opportunity to tell Antoine that, since he left, the situation in the team had completely changed. Sammy did not accept Antoine's transfer, so he felt unfairness, began acting uncontrollably, and drew others into doing shady things. Afterwards, they established a special investigation unit headed by Sammy. And the person who had transferred Antoine away, the police chief, was the support behind Sammy. Many people joined this group for money, while Hannah, not wanting to collude with them, transferred to the anti-flower unit. After they finished discussing the main business, they also talked about personal matters. Antoine explained that the reason he hadn't contacted Hannah was because he couldn't stand being demoted, having to start over, and felt he wasn't worthy of her. But Hannah didn't care about those things. Misunderstandings cleared up, they reunited smoothly. The next day, Antoine used his patrol duty as an excuse to go to that woman's house and asked when the last time she saw Richard was. She said Richard had come once the previous week, and since then there had been no news. But Antoine didn't believe the words of an addict, so he unlocked her phone using a passcode and went into her photo album, where he found many photos were taken at the same club. He immediately asked where that place was. It was the Race nightclub. In the photos, Antoine also saw Sammy's picture, so he immediately sent the photo to his own phone. He instructed the woman that if there was any news about Richard, she must report it to him first. Afterwards, he sent that photo to Hannah and asked her to investigate who the girl next to Sammy was. In another development, Richard was hastily packing his bags and getting into Sammy's car to go to a safer place, this time hiding. After calming down, Richard learned that Antoine was looking for him. He didn't understand why someone completely unrelated to the incident decided to get involved. Sammy also didn't understand, but still reminded Richard to continue hiding until everything was resolved. Finally, Sammy and Antoine met. Antoine took the initiative to question him. Currently, Sammy had 2 subordinates dead and 1 missing. Antoine asked if he had anything to say, but Sammy calmly replied that many police officers commit suicide every year. He said they were fed up with this job, and began talking about Richard's instability when Antoine wasn't around. Before Antoine left, Sammy sent regards to Hannah, saying there was a rumor that he and she were dating again, but Antoine said not to mention her. As soon as he left the room, Antoine immediately received a call from that woman, saying that Richard had just contacted her. She knew the time and place of the meeting, but Antoine had to bring money to buy the information. The two agreed to meet at 11 p.m. on the rooftop of a parking lot. Before the scheduled time, Antoine returned to the police station office to get a bag of confiscated cash, then went to the meeting point. The woman was already waiting. She came to the car and demanded Antoine hand over the money, but Antoine firmly insisted on paying only after meeting Richard. While the two were still arguing, a car suddenly sped towards them and crashed directly into the woman. Antoine drew his gun and returned fire, and the two sides exchanged gunfire. After confirming the woman had died, the other car drove away. The next day, Antoine was brought before the Internal Affairs Group for acting on his own initiative. He had caused serious consequences and was likely to face both imprisonment and internal disciplinary action. In addition, the police chief told Antoine that they had examined the shell casings left at the scene last night, and the results matched the shell casings from the murders of police officers Vinny and Wallet. What was noteworthy was that this gun was registered under Richard's name. In other words, Richard had killed people. But Antoine didn't believe that Richard would kill police officers without reason. Charles, standing nearby, seeing Antoine wasn't cooperating, said directly, "This case is very serious." Not sending him to jail was already to avoid a serious scandal. If a regular police officer got involved, and the press reported it, the consequences would be unpredictable. After raising his voice, Charles also softened and said that the local prosecutor and the police chief agreed to overlook Antoine's involvement in last night's shooting. But because Antoine had made serious mistakes, the decision was to suspend him from duty until Richard was apprehended and the case was closed. Antoine had no choice but to hand over his badge and gun. As soon as he left the office, Antoine immediately told his colleagues, "I've been suspended until my superiors finish hiding their mess of a scandal." Nevertheless, this still couldn't stop Antoine from continuing to investigate. Antoine went to the nightclub where Richard had previously appeared. Antoine showed the photo and asked who the man standing next to Vinny was, but the owner seemed annoyed and didn't want to say anything. Antoine had no choice but to try finding the hostesses in the photo, but as soon as he found someone, the owner immediately called security to kick Antoine out of the club. Right then, Hannah called Antoine. She had found out Kareem's identity from the photo. He was connected to a criminal organization. Hannah had also collected many related documents and invited Antoine to her place to talk in detail. But right after that, a car sped towards them and kidnapped Antoine. Antoine was brought before Kareem, the guy with the beard in the photo. Kareem still remembered Antoine. Antoine said he had seen a photo of Kareem and Richard and asked what they were doing together. Kareem didn't answer, only saying he hadn't killed anyone, didn't know or care where Richard was, and at the same time warned Antoine not to stick his nose into other people's business, otherwise it wouldn't end well. Afterwards, Kareem flipped open Antoine's ID card to look at it and threatened, "If you keep investigating, the consequence won't just be broken arms or legs." Having said that, he delivered a strong punch that knocked Antoine unconscious. On the other side, Hannah waited and waited but didn't get news from Antoine, so she put things in the mailbox and prepared to go on a mission, but didn't notice a car following her. Not long after Hannah stopped on the road waiting for a red light, the other car quickly caught up and shot at Hannah. Fortunately, Hannah was not in life-threatening danger. Charles and Christina went to the hospital to visit her. As things became increasingly serious, if the case wasn't solved within 48 hours, both of them would face big trouble. This was why Charles proposed cooperating with Christina. After a little hesitation, Christina agreed. Both agreed that Antoine was the right person to solve this problem. Charles had just received news this morning that Antoine was found unconscious in the parking lot, with injuries from being beaten. But Antoine didn't reveal a single word. However, no matter what, Antoine was the only one who could push the case forward. Christina suggested letting him return to the investigation team, but Charles didn't agree. Internal Affairs reported to both of them that, after checking, they found the shell casings were of the same type as in the previous case, but they couldn't determine if it was the same killer. Afterwards, Internal Affairs informed Christina that this case had been transferred to the Major Crimes Unit, and she didn't need to continue handling it. This was a new directive from the police director, and the prosecutor had approved it. When Antoine walked in, Christina and Vinny had already left. Charles followed him into the hospital room. Antoine still firmly believed that Richard could not have shot his girlfriend. After leaving the hospital, Christina found Antoine again and said that she had important information. His friend had been made a scapegoat, but who the killer was, Christina couldn't determine yet. She had just been asked to leave the investigation. The case had been transferred to the Major Crimes Unit. Over the past few months, Christina's department had been investigating Sammy's group. She said that they, under the protection of the Ministry of Interior and inspection agencies, had committed many illegal acts. And Sammy's group had cooperated with other departments to deal with a criminal gang, whose main leader was Kareem. Afterwards, Christina and her team had heard an electronic conversation between Kareem and Sammy. In it, Kareem said that his flower had been completely robbed in one night, and his nephew was missing. Kareem asked Sammy to find out who had done it. It was also from here that Richard began to become paranoid and eventually suffered from mental illness. Christina needed Antoine to pull away from investigating Kareem, and at the same time also wanted to clarify who had harmed Hannah. Afterwards, Antoine took the letter Hannah had left behind. Inside, there were some documents. Next, he borrowed a car and weapons from Marcus and went to a large building. At this time, Sammy was at home watching news on television, reporting that the Special Forces had conducted a raid on the headquarters of the Search and Intervention Department. When he heard the person on the air confirm that the members of the raiding team had made serious mistakes, Sammy became angry and only cursed that person as a coward. Right after that, Sammy received a call from a stranger. This person was angry, saying that they would confess, and it wasn't their fault, but the fault of the Special Investigation Group. Sammy quickly consoled this person, then took his gun and went to find Richard. Richard, at this time, had returned to Sophia's side. He believed that the deaths of those people were greatly related to the things the two of them had done previously. Sammy had previously promised to resolve this matter. But when Richard discovered Sammy was wearing his gun, the matter was exposed. Sammy had nowhere to retreat. He immediately attacked Richard and his wife. Afterwards, he immediately called the police, saying that there were 2 bodies in Richard's house, and Richard had shot his wife dead and then committed suicide. After reporting, Sammy put the gun into Richard's hand. Meanwhile, Antoine was following the last man down the stairs and into his car. Immediately, he followed suit. Antoine followed until the other person stopped the car, then made his way to the outside of the house. Not long after, Kareem arrived. The young man, who had been hiding for 3 months, was finally caught by Kareem. Kareem demanded that he explain clearly what had happened 3 months ago. The young man had no choice but to report honestly. Initially, he and Kareem's nephew had intended to go to Spain to pick up goods. In the evening, they drove and avoided a police checkpoint. When he got out of the car to relieve himself, a group of people in a vehicle attacked them. They were fully armed, clearly prepared beforehand. Unexpectedly, the dog hidden in the trunk bit the hand of one person in the group. Kareem's nephew took the opportunity to counterattack, but was immediately shot dead. Afterwards, that group of people took the goods from the trunk and took Kareem's nephew's body with them. The young man who survived, fearing Kareem's scolding, went into hiding. Unexpectedly, Kareem still found him. He confessed that those people were well-trained, looking like police officers. And, in the group, there was a person named Sammy. Kareem then sent the young man to meet his maker as well. And immediately, Kareem ordered his subordinates to take the young man's body away. After Antoine eavesdropped, he left and immediately sent a message to Sammy, saying that Kareem knew he was the commander. When Sammy received the message, he hurriedly reported to Charles that there was an urgent matter at home and immediately drove away. When Sammy got home, Kareem was already there, sitting and drinking in the house. Sammy had no choice but to obediently hand over his gun to Kareem. He emphasized that he was just following orders from superiors. Originally, they didn't intend to rob the truck to make Kareem and his rival confront each other. Unexpectedly, they accidentally killed Kareem's nephew. One mistake led to everything happening now. At the same time, Antoine called his friend Titus to Sammy's doorstep. He briefly explained the situation, preparing his equipment while talking. The two prepared to sneak inside. After entering, Antoine and Titus immediately attacked. A melee ensued. They held Sammy's wife hostage and retreated to the backyard. Just then, Charles drove up, and when Kareem threw the hostage down and started shooting, the group of people combined their efforts and shot him dead. Antoine went back inside the house to persuade Sammy to surrender, but Sammy understood that only death could put others at ease and keep his wife and children safe, so he decided to end his life. The next morning, Charles came to see Antoine, who was very sad. To protect Antoine, Charles had an agreement with him that Antoine would testify that he had never been suspended from duty and would testify that Sammy was just a brave police officer and all bad things were caused by Kareem. Antoine didn't want to continue lying, so he decided to leave. A moment later, Garnier called, saying there was something he needed to give to Antoine. When Antoine came to see, there were documents sent from Richard before he was killed. Those people up there, perhaps, didn't expect that Antoine would record all their bad deeds. Now, almost all the people involved were dead. No one could expose the truth, unless Antoine publicizes the documents, but there would certainly be no good outcome. Everything depended on Antoine's decision. Antoine felt very difficult and called Charles to ask why he knew so much truth, but still deliberately concealed it. Charles advised Antoine not to act rashly. The documents must not be publicized, and invited Antoine to his office for discussion. But unbeknownst to him, in the office, superiors had already issued a directive that Antoine, if he didn't hand over the documents and forget everything, would only be able to follow the fate of his colleagues. Meanwhile, Antoine was on his way to the office. His car passed by some thugs. One of them, who had previously lost in an underground match against Antoine. The guy, not accepting defeat, immediately chased after him on a bicycle and shot Antoine dead. Finally, this was a happy ending for everyone. The documents were taken, and the police organized a memorial service for Antoine as if his death had some value. The movie ends here. As a French crime film, the film 36 Quai d'Orfèvres continues to show the coldness of power struggles within the police force and the dark side of human nature, where high-ranking officials are willing to sacrifice their colleagues' lives to protect personal interests. Thank you for watching today's video. How do you feel about this movie? Please leave your comments below the video.